39 people packed their bags before they lay down to die. Not metaphorically, literally. Folded clothes, zipped luggage, $5 in each pocket in case they needed it on the other side. They weren't crazy. They were convinced. That's the difference. And that difference is everything. Because here's the one thing every cult in this video had in common. Not the poison, not the fire, not the prison sentences. One thing. Each of these leaders found people at their most lost and offered them something more powerful than logic. They offered certainty. They replaced the messy, painful, uncertain reality those people were living in with a new one, a better one that made complete sense, had clear answers, and felt more real than anything they'd known before. And once someone's reality has been replaced, you can ask almost anything of them. Packed bags, $5, a journey they believed in completely. This is how each of those realities finally broke. Jim Jones understood something most people don't. You don't control people with fear alone. You control them by making the alternative to obedience unthinkable. He called the drills White Night. Sirens in the middle of the night. Followers jolted awake and herded to the central pavilion. Jones on the PA system, slow and certain, telling them enemies were coming, that the end was near, that the only escape was together. Then they handed out the drink. Everyone swallowed it. And then Jones would announce it was a test, that they'd passed, that their willingness to die for the cause proved they understood what was real. He ran these drills multiple times across months. Each time, the act of drinking became a little more normal, a little more like loyalty, a little more like love. So when the real night came, November 18th, 1978, many of them didn't know it was different. It started because of a U.S. congressman named Leo Ryan. Families back in the States hadn't heard from their loved ones in months. Letters sounded scripted. Ryan flew to Guyana with journalists and concerned relatives. Jones let them in. The cameras were rolling. He had no choice. For one day, it looked manageable. Followers smiled and said they were happy. But then 16 people quietly slipped notes to Ryan's delegation. They wanted out. They wanted to leave on the plane. Jones let them go. And then he sent gunmen to the airstrip. Leo Ryan was shot dead on the runway. 3 journalists and 1 departing member died beside him. The gunmen walked back through the jungle. Jones got on the PA. It was time, he said. The enemies were coming. What they were about to do wasn't suicide. It was revolutionary. The outside world would never understand, but they knew what was real. They'd always known. The poison was mixed into a large vat of flavor aid, cyanide, sedatives, tranquilizers. Nurses drew it into syringes for the children first. Parents held their children still. Not because they wanted them to die, because Jones had spent years replacing their reality with one in which this was the most loving thing a parent could do. Some adults drank willingly. Some were forced. Some ran for the jungle. Guards turned them back. 918 people died. A third of them were children. Jim Jones was found in a chair with a gunshot wound to his head. Whether he shot himself or someone did it for him was never established. A tape recorder ran through the entire event, Jones narrating the deaths, his voice slowing, losing coherence, continuing until the tape ran out. The recording is 44 minutes long. He had replaced their reality so completely that dying felt like the only rational choice. That's not madness. That's the system working exactly as designed. In 1997, a comet called Hale-Bopp was making its closest pass to Earth. An amateur astronomer posted online that a Saturn-shaped object appeared to be following it, possibly a spacecraft. Marshall Applewhite read that post and told his followers their ride had arrived. He had been building to this moment since the early 1970s, moving his group from city to city, cutting them off from family and outside contact, teaching them that their bodies were temporary containers and that their true selves were alien souls waiting for collection. He called himself Do. He called his followers his crew. The real world, he taught them, was not this one. By 1997, the crew was 38 people. They lived together in a rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California. Matching black uniforms, shaved heads, a functional web design business. Neighbors found them odd, but harmless. What no one outside knew was that Applewhite had spent decades making the idea of leaving Earth feel more real than staying on it. They chose a last meal, drove together to Marie Callender's and ordered the same thing, chicken pot pie and cheesecake, then came home. The process took 3 days. Phenobarbital mixed into pudding, washed down with vodka. They went in shifts. The ones still alive covered the dead with purple shrouds, folded neatly to the shoulders. Then those people lay down too. $5 in each shirt pocket, bags packed beside each body, arms at their sides. A former member received a package in the mail that same day, goodbye videos from each of them. Calm, almost cheerful, explaining where they were going. He drove to the house and used his key. All 39. Matching outfits, bags packed. The woman who had originally recruited him was among them. He had tried to warn her years before. She had told him kindly that he simply wasn't ready to understand. She didn't need to be rescued. In the reality Applewhite had built for her, she was finally, completely free. David Koresh had one extraordinary ability. He could take the Book of Revelation, the most cryptic, contested text in the Christian canon, and make it make total sense. Complete sense. Sense that answered every question, connected every thread, placed every listener at the center of the most important moment in human history. He could do this for 12 hours straight without notes. His followers at Mount Carmel Center outside Waco, Texas, weren't people who had been tricked. They were people who had heard something that felt, for the first time, completely true. Koresh had given them a reality in which they were chosen, significant, and guided by the only person who understood what God actually wanted. He'd also been stockpiling weapons for years, and that, eventually, brought federal agents to his door. On February 28, 1993, 76 ATF agents arrived in cattle trailers. The element of surprise was already gone. A local cameraman had accidentally tipped off a Davidian member while asking for directions. Koresh knew they were coming. When the shooting started, nobody agrees who fired first. 4 ATF agents and 6 Davidians were dead before it stopped. What followed was 51 days that the FBI later described as one of the most frustrating operations in its history. Koresh negotiated by phone for hours at a time, making promises and retreating into scripture. He agreed to come out after the Super Bowl. He didn't. He agreed to surrender once he finished his written interpretation of the first seal. He kept writing. FBI negotiators believed progress was being made. Tactical commanders believed Koresh was using the Bible as a stalling weapon, and he was. Because in the reality Koresh had constructed, surrender wasn't an option Scripture permitted. His followers weren't staying because they were trapped. They were staying because leaving would mean the reality they built their lives around wasn't real. On April 19th, the FBI inserted CS gas into the compound. The buildings caught fire. The cause remains disputed. FBI recordings captured voices inside discussing spreading fuel, but investigators never reached a definitive conclusion. 76 people died, including 25 children. Koresh was found with a bullet wound to his forehead, almost certainly fired at his own request. The ruins still exist outside Waco. Surviving members built a small chapel on the site. Some still visit regularly. Some still believe. Because when someone has replaced your reality, the evidence of its failure isn't always enough to bring the old one back. Tell me in the comments, which moment in this video you found hardest to believe actually happened? Charles Manson never killed anyone. That was deliberate. He had constructed a reality for his followers in which he was simultaneously a prophet, a father figure, and the key to understanding the apocalypse, which he claimed was coming in the form of a race war that would destroy white America. He called it Helter Skelter. He claimed it was hidden in Beatles lyrics. He could explain exactly how, and his explanations were convincing enough that educated young people sat in the California desert and believed every word. Once you'd accepted that reality, and the followers had, completely, the next step followed logically. If the war was coming, someone had to start it. If Black Americans were going to be blamed, someone had to commit the crimes first. Manson didn't need to hold a knife. He just needed people who trusted his version of the world more than their own. On August 8, 1969, he sent 4 followers to a house in the Hollywood Hills. Kill everyone inside. Make it look witchy. He stayed at the ranch. Sharon Tate was 8.5 months pregnant. She begged them to let her live long enough to have her baby. They killed her and 4 others. The word pigs was written on the wall in blood. The following night, the LaBiancas. Helter-skelter on the refrigerator. The LAPD investigated for months without connecting the crimes to Manson. What broke it wasn't detective work, it was a car. His followers were arrested weeks later at Spawn Ranch on auto theft charges. In custody, follower Susan Atkins mentioned the Tate murders to another inmate. That inmate told authorities. Manson was convicted in 1971 without having personally killed anyone. 46 years in prison, hundreds of interviews, a swastika carved into his forehead. Parole hearings he treated like performances. He died in 2017 at 83. Natural causes. Never stopped explaining his version of reality to anyone who would listen. The followers who killed for him maintained for decades that they had done the right thing. That's what a replaced reality looks like from the inside. Keith Raniere did not call himself a prophet. He called himself a scientist, an educator. He wore a tracksuit and talked about human potential. His organization, NXIVM, looked like a corporate training program. Colored sashes to mark your progress, seminars on executive leadership, clean branding, headquarters in Albany. Celebrities enrolled, politicians attended events. The daughters of a billionaire joined and brought their mother. Raniere had built something more sophisticated than most cult leaders attempted. He had replaced his followers' reality not with religion or prophecy, but with self-improvement. The idea that you were broken and that he alone had the system to fix you. Every doubt you raised about him was reframed as evidence of your own psychological limitations. Every time you questioned the cost or the methods, you were told the discomfort meant it was working. Underneath the seminars was a hidden inner layer called DOS. Women who were invited in were required to provide collateral before initiation, compromising photographs, signed confessions to things they hadn't done, information that could destroy their careers and families. The collateral was held permanently. Then they were branded with a cauterizing instrument. Raniere's initials burned into the skin near the hip. Other members held them down and told them to breathe, to say they were asking for this. Sessions were filmed. It unraveled when one member went to the New York Times in 2017. Then more women came forward. Then federal prosecutors. Raniere fled to Mexico, believing distance would protect him. The FBI tracked his IP address. Mexican authorities arrested him in March 2018. Convicted on all counts: sex trafficking, racketeering, forced labor, exploitation of a child. 120 years. From prison, he still files appeals. His argument consistently is that everything was consensual. He hasn't stopped explaining, because in his version of reality, he is still right. Most Americans have never heard of the Order of the Solar Temple. It ended on 3 continents over 3 years. It still barely made the front page in the United States. Luc Jouret was a Belgian homeopathic doctor. Joseph de Mambro was a French businessman with a fraud conviction and an obsession with the Knights Templar. Together, they told followers they were reincarnated crusaders, ancient souls preparing humanity for a passage to a higher existence centered on the star Sirius. Membership was expensive and exclusive. Doctors, lawyers, business people across Switzerland, France, and Canada joined. Robes, swords, elaborate ceremony. The meetings felt ancient and chosen. In October 1994, 53 people were found dead across sites in Switzerland and Quebec. Among the Quebec dead was a 3-month-old infant, stabbed through the chest with a wooden stake. Members had decided the child was the Antichrist. The Swiss locations were set on fire. Some members had been murdered before the buildings were lit. Others appeared to have participated willingly in what they believed was a transit ritual. Jouret and de Mambro were among the Swiss dead. It should have been over. In December 1995, 16 more bodies were found in a forest in France. Members who had watched 1994 happen and still believed. In March 1997, 5 more in Quebec. 3 of them had survived the 1994 deaths, spent 2 years waiting for the passage to Sirius, and when it didn't arrive on schedule, decided to make it happen themselves. They had been given a reality in which death was not an ending, but a departure. And when the departure kept not happening, they chose it anyway. Because the alternative was admitting that none of it had ever been real.